Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Morik.
And I'm Lover's Lens, and today we have a very special guest joining us, the developer behind Your Crown is Mine, a fantasy visual novel packed with political intrigue, stat management, and romance. Lyyycaena, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
To get to know each other a little bit, can you tell us about yourself and your story as a developer?
Yeah, sure. I'm a student right now and I'd started drawing around 5 years ago as a hobby digitally. And I first started with pure illustrations and comics, and I also liked writing stories and novels in my free time. And then about 1 year ago I started to code games because I thought it would be a great way to do visual storytelling. And my work is probably inspired by Volcano Princess and other stats-raising life sims, as well as comics with the Villainess genre, which are quite popular in recent years.
Now that you mentioned that you started with comics, I definitely see the influence in the game. There are sections where it does feel like a comic a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. I'm glad you noticed.
It's very unique approach. I think I've seen only one other Otome game with that kind of approach, and it wasn't in that much manga style, more like comics. But here we have a nice balance between manga and comics, and I loved it. I simply loved it.
Thank you.
So to set the stage, we're not the pure-hearted heroine, but the villainess. You're not just navigating high society, you're also running for the crown of the whole nation. Can you give us a spoiler-free summary of the game?
In this game, you mainly take the throne and try to fix a corrupt kingdom, but you can also worsen it. It's sort of a fantasy life sim where you balance your stats with every choice. And even your romances can help you gain power over the kingdom. Every choice you make will affect the whole nation, and in each in-game day, you can choose daily activities that affect your stats. And there will also be story content and character interactions in every in-game day. All of these are interlinked with your stats. And you will play as a lady who was supposed to marry the Duke until he replaced you with a soft and saintly girl. As a calculated schemer, you have been branded a villainess. And after your public fall from grace, your goal is to take the throne in an election where your opponent is the Duke. And if you do manage to win the throne, that's sort of where the real fun begins, and you can rule your kingdom. There are also boiling conflicts in the background of the story. For example, your citizens oppose a new energy source that is from your close ally's country, and another kingdom is threatening war against you. There are various conspiracies and schemes to shift blame onto innocent scapegoats, and the four love interests are highly involved in these plots. They have their own views and goals, so you also have to figure out who you want to align yourself with.
So winning the crown is just the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
You know, what I find really interesting in your game is the fact that we start playing as the antagonist in the story. And I wanted to ask you, what actually inspired you to make her the protagonist and the potential savior or destroyer of a whole nation?
I was inspired by comics where the main character gets reincarnated into a story as the villainess, and it's quite interesting to see how sometimes they will try and continue the villainess path, but others might try to change the story completely. So I always thought, what would I do if that happened to me? And I thought that would be a great idea for a game, for players to be able to choose what they want to do in those circumstances. It's definitely fun to be able to play as a villain, because in most games that's not possible. At the start, the choices are more tame in the introductory phase, but as the story progresses, you can choose to be more evil. And I wanted to know that when faced with tough choices, can players still choose to maintain their integrity, or will they take the easy and immoral path? I think this would be really fun for people to try and play as the evil character.
So
it was definitely fun. I'm sorry, Morik, for interrupting you, but I just wanted to say that it was very fun for me when I tested the demo. And I was constantly torn apart between being the nice guy and being the bad guy in the story.
I was going to say, I'm somewhat familiar with the genre. I've played other games in it, and also I know some animes that cover someone reincarnates into a villainess or is the villainess of a story. But almost all of them have you be the good guy, like not follow the evil route, I've noticed. So it's kind of refreshing to have a game where you can still be the bad guy.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely had an issue with those comics where the character seems to take revenge but then totally give up later and become a good guy. So I wanted players to have the option to continue playing as the evil person because that's quite rare to see in a lot of stories.
So you have the choice to either be nice and tactful in the game or a total bitch and just go on with the role of the villainess. How did you actually balance those two extremes?
In every situation in the game, you can choose from many different options that range from morally good to evil, and those will be recorded within the game's stats and affect the story. So you can sometimes choose to be good in certain situations and evil in others, but there will also be consequences for these choices.
So sometimes being the bad guy is more profitable in the long run.
Yeah, that can be true.
It's kind of like that in real life where making the good choice is harder because it doesn't win you anything. So it's nice to see that reflected into the game.
I don't agree with you. If you choose the nice path, you get the moral superiority. You know?
Okay, that's one way to put it. I was speaking more in the terms of politics because it always seems that it's a game that's pushing you to be worse. Politics in general, I mean.
Yeah, there are definitely some situations where players will be faced with tough choices. Where, for example, the citizens want you to do something but it might not even be the best choice for them. And so you have to decide how to balance the wishes of different groups. And I think that's sort of what makes the story more interesting.
Yes. And speaking about balancing, you're also balancing quite a bit of stats, running a campaign, building relationships. Can you tell us more about the resource management system in the game?
Yeah, so in each in-game day, you can choose different activities to do. These activities will consume your stats, such as wealth, energy, or mood, but in return they can boost your other stats, like charisma, intellect, wealth, popularity, and more. If any of the stats fall to 0, you might trigger a bad ending. And your choice of daily activities will change your stats and the story. You might also encounter the characters in your activities. So in Act 1, there are 8 types of activities to choose from for each weekday. For example, debating at the Model Imperial Council, flower arrangement, combat training, investment club, the Citizens Council, and working and resting. And on weekends, you can choose to visit each of the love interests. In Act 2 and onwards, after winning the election, there will be more activities and stats relating to ruling the kingdom. And you can also affect the kingdom's budget, defense, foreign relations, and more. And after your daily activities, in the story content, you can also get to know the characters and see more of the story. And you can also increase or decrease a love interest's affection.
So the game actually continues after you win the elections?
Yeah. There are mainly 3 parts in this game. In Act 1, which is around 40% of the whole game, you will be fighting for the crown, and if you do win, then you can continue on to managing the country, but that's not included in the demo.
Okay, this sounds very exciting. Like I told that it's gonna end up on the elections, but it's a way bigger story than I thought. And I noticed that every choice you make affects the nation literally. You already mentioned the bad endings, and I wonder, like, you can actually lose the election, right? Or get people killed on the way?
Yeah, there are many types of bad endings that you might find yourself in. You can lose the election if your popularity is not high enough, and then the game will end at Act 1. Even if you win and become the monarch, your choices might also lead the kingdom to disaster. For example, if the citizens are too angry with you, you might be deposed, or another kingdom might have a serious conflict with you. If you get bad endings like these, there are still certain choices that can help you sort of cheat and continue the game, but they will come with a price. If you truly end the game at a bad ending, you can still go back to a previous save and try again.
That's why the game prompts me so much to save my
yes.
progress
think because I failed to save, I didn't visit one of the characters enough who has major political influence over the results. I think Helios was his name. He did not end up supporting me.
And those who control the media control the world.
Yep.
So it is important. Yeah.
Speaking of the characters, you've also built a romance into the political web. Optional, of course, but also quite juicy. Let's talk about some of the love interests.
Yeah, so the affection stats of the 4 love interests can also affect some parts of your rule. For example, your popularity and foreign relations. Most things aren't locked behind any particular love interest, so you can still win the election or achieve your goals even if you haven't romanced some of them. As you said, Helios can boost your popularity, but there are also other characters who can make up for the loss in popularity if you did not visit him. There are also many ways to change your stats, and affection is only one of them. Near the end of the game, you can formally choose one of the love interests to marry you as your consort if their affection is high enough. This will also affect your foreign relations and popularity, though you can also choose to have no consort.
I want to focus a little bit on the love interests in the game, since we're an Otome podcast and that's always the juicy part. So let's start with Edgar. He's our cold ex-fiancé and Duke of the North. He's got that frosty noble energy. What's his deal, actually?
I noticed in most Villainess comics that there was also always a cold Duke of the North. And this is sort of a character trope where he seems cold on the surface, but he's actually warm on the inside. So I wanted to explore that character trope a bit more. He's sort of a classic character, so players might already know what it's like to have a cold character. And also wanted to dive deeper into his backstory and motivations, why he is cold and seems like an antagonist, and what's the reason for his actions, but these are sort of spoilers.
So he has a warmer side to him.
Yeah, it's possible to find out his warmer side if you make certain choices.
I don't want to spoil too much, but in my playthrough, I decided to check on him. Like, I kept talking to him, and at some moment I realized that the things are not exactly the way they look. I thought that he's a total evil prick that's just wants to ruin me in the game, but it wasn't like that, honestly.
It didn't have that close
just
of
add a bit more to that. I do think it's great to have characters that are morally grey instead of pure evil. For example, your own main character, some of your actions might be evil, but the motivations behind that can still be quite complex. So for all the other characters, it's also the same.
And would the reverse also be true? Like, let's talk about Rosalie. In her case, she's very nice and loving. She's the new fiancé, but she claims to love you, and that's why she tried to get into nobility. Can you tell us more about her?
Yeah, so she's sort of a common-born character, different from the others who were born into high status, which I think gives a different perspective on the kingdom and the citizens. She's the only way we can really see how the villagers live. She did decide to get into high society to help the villagers and also get to know you, and there's some spoilers for the reasons behind that. And her main goal is to help the villagers, which presents a sort of dilemma, because when you're running the country, you might have other priorities, but her affection will be quite tied to helping the villagers where she's from.
Okay, so she kind of complicates. Do you choose to help the people and maintain her affection, or do you go for a more, shall I say, scheming route, or what's the word? Not practical. I forgot the word, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Straight to the point kind of a thing.
Yes.
So next we have Arsielle, and she's a foreigner power player. Kind of a villainous ex-villainous energy and a major political threat or ally. Tell us about her and her dynamics with the main character.
She can definitely come across as another villainess, and I thought that would be interesting. In most stories, there's only one villainess, and that kind of gets boring if she's the only one who creates schemes while other people are victims. So she's sort of an equal to the main character. You can choose to befriend her and ally with her, then you can work together with her. but that would mean that you also have to agree with some of her actions, which might seem quite immoral or wrong. But if you do choose to turn her into your antagonist, then she's quite a threat. Her motivations, goals, and even her identity aren't clear at the start. So she's quite mysterious, and I think that makes her more fun.
I must agree that she's very fun. Like, she's very shady from day one, but at the same time, kind of attractive. And I had a hard time choosing what to do.
Same here, honestly, but I was more so not sure if she was actually good intentioned or actually planning to betray me at some point. So, good to know that it can be either. And of course, there's also Helios, the gentle, mysterious businessman with an affinity for flowers. What role does he play in the MC's journey, and what's the love story there?
He's also from another kingdom, and I wanted to represent another perspective, which is not in the main kingdom of the game. He is sort of placed in a high society role while not really wanting it, which is quite a foil to the main character who does want to be more ambitious. I think for the main story about him, it's quite spoilery, so I will leave that for the main game.
Okay, so we're gonna learn that. We're gonna learn the love story after the full game is out. And I wanted to ask you, can your relationships in-game actually change the outcome of your rule?
Yeah, the affection stats of the love interests can affect some parts of your rule. For example, if they like you, they might help you, and that can increase some of your stats, like your popularity and foreign relations. Meanwhile, if you have a very bad relationship with a certain character, then maybe they will sabotage you or become sort of your enemy. There are also many ways to change your stats, and affection is only one of them, so players don't have to be afraid of being locked out of certain content. And near the end, when you choose one of them to marry as your consort, although you can also choose none of them, that will also affect the ending and the outcome of your rule.
Now I'm curious, is it possible to maintain a good relationship with all of them, at least not to avoid them being your enemy?
Yeah, it should be possible. It's quite hard to balance, but you can still raise their affection a little bit so that all of them become your friend.
You're a min-maxer, Morik.
You played D&D with me, come on, you know.
Yeah. I know.
But yes, I was curious more so because I don't like upsetting people. Maybe not having enemies feels nice.
Well, good luck balancing that. That's what I'm gonna say.
Thank you. So, to move on to the art, the visuals are quite interesting. We already talked about how comics influence the style, and the style is quite rich and dynamic. Did you do all of this solo?
Yeah, I drew all the art by myself through the course of this year, from January until now. It takes around 1 to 5 hours to do one illustration, depending on the complexity of that particular scene. I have to speed up the process, for example by saving my color palette, using 3D models for posing. And since I've done comics before, I have practiced drawing efficiently. Since for comics you have to draw dozens of panels in a few weeks, so naturally your process becomes faster.
That's quite impressive, honestly. So, you're doing the art. Are you doing the programming yourself as well?
Yeah, all the art, programming, writing, everything is done by me. For music, I have help from someone called DT Chords.
Wow.
That's nice.
Okay. So, actually a full-on solo dev. Maybe except the music, but okay, no one actually expects from one person to be able to do all of that plus music.
Your Crown is Mine has every emotion portrayed through a visual. You did a lot of art there. Tell us how many sieges you've planned for the full game and how many endings.
In total, there are hundreds of artworks, including the sprites and backgrounds. Every character also has a small portrait which will show their expressions in certain times, and there's around 10 expressions for each main character. And I think in the end there will be around 50 to 100 CGs, and some of them have a manhwa style. There are also more than 10 main endings, not counting the premature bad endings that you might encounter.
Okay, that's a lot of artwork actually. Not sure
And
how
writing.
And writing and everything. I'm not sure how you're able to do all of that, honestly. But it's very impressive.
Thank you. I think it's because it's the summer holidays now, so I did have a lot more time than usual, so I've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, summer does certainly help with that, but even so, I guess as you said, you have experience drawing for comics, which gives you the skill to do it quicker than most people.
Yeah.
And what's the end date? When is the full game coming out?
Around spring of next year, that's 2026.
Oh, that's a tight schedule.
It is indeed. And speaking of releases, the 2-hour demo is going to launch on Steam today. That's quite exciting. What can players expect from this version?
The entire game will be split into 3 main acts, and the demo will cover around half of the first act. That will be around 1 to 3 hours of playtime, depending on your choices and what you do. It will cover 17 in-game days. In the demo, you'll get to know the characters at first, and it's a bit of an introduction to the world. Some of the love interests have a more slow burn route, so you might only become their friend and get to know them, while romance will develop later, while other routes can also develop faster. For example, there's a kiss scene that you can play in the demo. If you raise their affection high enough, you can also unlock special choices, and more development of the relationships will continue in the full game. In Act 1, your goal is to gain enough popularity to win the throne, and you can choose what skills to learn, who to befriend, and what to do.
Can you actually romance more than one character? Because in my playthrough, I ended up receiving the kiss scene, but I wonder if that happened, can I actually romance someone else after that?
Yeah, you can choose later to romance someone else, which will decrease the affection of the person that you originally were with. But if you do decide that choice, that's also fine. Although in the end, you can only choose one person to be your consort.
You really thought about everything. And I wanted to ask you about your community of players. How has it felt to interact with players in the initial phase of development, and did they inspire any ideas that made it into the story?
It has been really great reading their comments since it helped me tweak the writing. One thing they did inspire was to add certain romantic scenes because of their players' interest in it. But I think most of my influences have been from the Villainess manhwa genre, and many players have also liked that. So I did decide to continue on with that part.
I also wanted to ask, there's been a demand for a translation and mobile support. Are there any plans for that in the future?
Yeah, I think after I release the game, I might try to work with some fans to see if I can create fan translations for the game. As for mobile support, I'm not really sure how to do that now, but if there is enough demand in the future, then I can make it happen.
Yeah, I can see it being hard. I'm not a programmer, but making something function for a whole different system, I can imagine it being complicated.
Now it's time for my favorite part, is the exclusive content part. Lyyycaena sent us a whole presentation for the topic, and I'm eager to share it with you guys. So let's look at what's going on here. So let's go on with the first slide. Here we have all of the characters we get to meet in-game. And who's that little child here?
That's one of the children in the villagers, which will show you more about the citizens' daily life.
Yeah, and I encountered her when I visited the village the 2 times I did. She was with Rosalie.
Cute. I somehow missed her. But look at all of the beautiful clothes and dresses they all have.
I really like their style.
Yeah, were you inspired by something in particular while creating the clothing style?
Yeah, I read a lot of Villainess manhwa, and I found that there weren't really many games that focused on this. And in those comics, they always have a certain style of clothing, which seems to be inspired by perhaps 16th to 19th century Europe and nobility. So I did incorporate elements from that.
Yeah, I can see that. Very pretty with all the gems they have on their clothing and the hats. Very beautiful headpieces. So next we have a bit of CGs. What's going on here?
These are some artworks from the weekend activities where you can meet the different love interests and have conversations with them to get to know their motivations better. And there are different spots in the kingdom where you can encounter them, and these CGs are from those scenes.
I did encounter one of them with Rose in the village.
I somehow managed to encounter all of them, by the way.
All of them? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they all look so whimsical and bright and, sunny.
Sunny.
Yeah, very nice feeling, definitely a weekend. So, on the next sprite, we have our main character.
So these are different styles of clothing she can wear throughout the game, yes?
Yeah, in the game there are some places where you can choose a particular outfit, although some of them are also set. And these are some of her outfits, which will fit different parts of the game. And the expressions, there are also some of her expression cards, which will appear based on the story.
It might be a spoiler, but is this a wedding dress here?
No, I haven't included the wedding dress artwork here, because that would be a huge spoiler.
Yeah, that would be a
Yeah, okay,
spoiler.
I just had to ask,
I really like the top right one, so with the shoulder cloak.
Yeah, very political.
Yes.
Looks. And I like all of the dresses here as well. It's very nice. And next, what's this?
These are some pictures about the setting of the game, since the kingdom is also a huge part of the story. So at the top there's a world map for some of the main countries, and there are also 3 factions in your home kingdom. You can choose to align yourself with one of them, and they all have their own beliefs and views. And there's also a newspaper. These will appear based on your choices. So if you've done something controversial, then there might be a lot of news about that.
Best to befriend this newspaper guy then.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I really like the design here with the gems. Like, it's very beautiful, it's very pretty, and I find it very stylish. And here we can see some background art, right?
Yeah, these are some of the backgrounds that we'll see in the game.
And they're very,
I
very
recognize
pretty.
almost all of them.
Look at it, it has like this very bright and sunny style everywhere.
Yeah, like lights coming, it's noon as if.
Yeah, and next, here's some of your inspirations, right?
Yeah, I did mention that I was inspired by the Villainess manhwa genre, so here's some pictures from that genre, in case players are not sure where it came from.
I'm not very familiar with the genre, so this would be very useful for me to explore in the future. And here's some inspiration for the gameplay.
Yeah, for the gameplay part where you make choices to balance your stats, that comes from games such as Long Live the Queen, Volcano Princess, and Princess Maker, which have the story where you raise one person, help them decide what skills to learn. So I've incorporated some gameplay elements like that. And there's also Suzerain, where you manage a kingdom, and I've taken inspiration from that. Although the focus of the game is not as deep as that, because there's also more romance and story.
Quite nice.
I've actually heard of Princess Maker before, but I don't think I've heard of the other two.
Is this Princess Maker? Or this is Long Live the Queen?
The one on the bottom left is Princess Maker.
Okay, that's a lot of stats there.
Yeah.
And here we have the CGs. This one is one of my favorites, by the way.
Yeah, these are some of the CGs that you can get just by playing through the main story.
Are they all in the demo? Like, I've seen this one and this one and this one?
Seen 3 of them, I think?
4 of these are in the demo, yeah.
This one I haven't unlocked in my playthrough.
That one I have.
Oh, there's more CGs here.
Yeah, there's more here to show the different scenes that you can get in the story.
Okay, this was an interesting moment here, honestly. I'm not gonna talk too much, so I just don't want to spoiler. Yeah, but it was a very, very interesting moment. Like, I was very confused. And that's the moment I decided that I might want to talk to him a little bit more and see what's going on. And what's going on here?
Some people seem to be curious about how I created all the art for this game, so that's the process. Firstly, I draw the line art, and then I add the color and shading. Then finally highlights, I tried to add some yellow lights to make it seem more bright.
Again, very whimsical. Oh, it's early concept art. Okay.
Yeah, these originally I tried to make this story for a comic, but then later I decided it would be more fun as a game where people can make different choices. And these are some of the concepts for some of the characters.
I can't really recognize this character here.
I think it's an early design for Arsielle.
Yeah, she looks more like herself in the bottom right. Yes.
But I really like the hairstyle here. It's very cute. Oh, and this is the comic you were talking about.
Yeah, originally I wanted to make the story as a comic, and back then the setting was not that historical. It had some more sci-fi and futuristic elements. But later I adapted the story a bit when I changed it into the game version.
That explains the screen in one of the panels.
Yeah, here. And
yes,
here.
and to the left as well.
Yeah.
It's Skype chat.
Yeah. Skype is dead, by the way.
I know.
No more Skype chat. I really like the detail and the eye here. Very pretty. You've got some very, very good shading skill, I think. I don't know if it's shading, but very pretty color palettes you use, and everything looks very nice. And I think that's about it. That was quite a lot. Thank you for sending us all of the stuff. It's always interesting to see how a concept began, a concept ended up on a game, in the end.
Yeah, I think the main reason I changed it to a game instead of a comic was because comics just take too long to create, and I thought it would be more fun if people could make their own choices in the story.
I mean, visual novels and comics are kind of adjacent. They are quite similar in many regards, honestly.
But still, the comic requires a lot more drawing than
yes,
a
it does
visual
require
novel
a lot more drawing.
Are you planning to actually put on these comics parts that you made into additional DLC or something for the game?
I'm not sure since it's already changed a lot to the current version, but I might release it in the future.
As a spin-off, for example.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sending all of these stuff. They were quite interesting to look at. I'm very excited for the full game.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Your passion for the character-driven political drama is so refreshing. Anything you want to say to our fans, to your fans and our listeners?
I hope that people will enjoy the different choices you can make, since that's the biggest emphasis I tried to create. And please wishlist the game on Steam so that you will be notified when it fully releases.
And to our listeners, as Lyyycaena said, don't forget to wishlist Your Crown Is Mine on Steam, play the demo, and follow her newsletter for bonus content.
And remember, whether you're a novel, villainess, or a scheming diplomat, your crown is yours to claim.